Yeah, it's funny. It's giving me the thumbnail of Jack. Okay, but that's fine. Okay, so you're all seeing Plant-Based 101, right? Okay. Okay, so Plant-Based 101. So this is really an introduction to plant-based nutrition. It's not meant to be a be all end all. It's not really a how-to. There's a little bit of how-to at the end, but it's really about how, it's about why. It's about the why and what it's not, to just give you a little intro to it. So it's not the be all end all. So just a disclaimer. So anything I tell you or anything on deirdresweeney.com is not, you shouldn't consider it, it's for informational, educational purposes only. As I say, don't go making a gigantic change to your eating without talking with your medical practitioner. So particularly if you're on a lot of medication, if you're on any medications, because if you were to switch completely to this way of eating, it can really make it can affect your blood pressure, really making it better, make your cholesterol better, your diabetes better. So you really want to make sure that your medical provider is aware so that you're keeping track of those things and if you need your medications adjusted. So first, let me introduce you to Oscar and Palermo. So Oscar's the black and white dog on the left and Palermo's the white one. Those are our two dogs. They're two rescue Labradoodles. And I have them to thank as to why I am a plant-based provider. So we rescued Oscar about 4 years ago. And prior to that, I was always a vegetarian. Well, I say I was a vegetarian, but I was a lousy vegetarian. I would joke that I was a vegetarian except for, steak and lobster, except for the good stuff. And then I say a pescatarian, but I really wasn't. So, but then we got Oscar and, I've been reading some books or whatever. One day I'm at dinner eating a piece of pork and I'm patting my dog and patting Oscar. And it occurred to me something that I had read that pigs are actually smarter than dogs. They have the intellectual capability of a 3-year-old. They have a vocabulary. And it just occurred to me, I said, well, if I'm not going to eat my dog, why would I eat the pig? And from that day on, I stopped eating animal products. So it was a little bit of a transition, but I decided on that day. So I really have Oscar to thank. And then about 6 months after getting Oscar, we got his half brother Palermo, the white doodle there. So so being a nurse practitioner, as I was learning more about what it meant to be plant-based, I was doing research. So I was doing a lot of research on the science behind it, too, because I wanted to be able to talk to my patients about it. And the data, the science on the benefits of a plant-based diet is really overwhelming. It has been there for more than 30 years that this way of eating is really how primarily humans are meant to eat. And the health benefits of it are the data is it's really just overwhelming. And when I found that all out, my first reaction is, I would say I was pissed. I was mad. Because as a healthcare provider, I didn't know that. It was never taught in school. And I worked at Harvard teaching hospitals. I worked at some of the best hospitals in the country, and still I had never heard it. So it really got me going. So after doing all that research, and then I adopted the diet myself, I quickly lost a lot of weight, and all my friends were saying, oh, you should teach us how to do it. So that really became the impetus for me to kind of start trying to educate other people on the benefits of this way of eating. So it's all thanks to Oscar and Palermo. So Michael Pollan, so I'm not sure if people are familiar with Michael Pollan, but he is a food writer. And the one book that I'm most familiar with is called Omnivore's Dilemma, and it's really about what our dilemmas are, and like the omnivore, all the different things that go into eating animal products, and but it all seems confusing, right? So depending upon where you look, what you read or who you talk to these days, and, it seems as though there's a different diet is touted as the next best thing. So keto, don't get me going on keto. Paleo carnivore is a thing, which we are not meant to be full on carnivores. Low fat, low carb, which is really a type of keto, and then plant-based. So there really is not one way of eating that is best for heart disease, or it's like one that's best for heart disease or one that's best for diabetes, or another way for autoimmune disease. There's really one that the data has shown is best for all of these. And there's one that has been shown to be the way of eating to actually improve health, reverse disease, and is sustainable over time. And that is the low fat, plant-based way of eating. And this is really the way humans were intended to eat. People can try it. We could talk forever about paleo and people saying, but actually, historically speaking, we were mostly plant eaters, and we ate a little bit of meat. And the meat, even in the paleo time, it's nothing compared to the meat, the farm-raised meat that you find in the grocery stores now. So eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Michael Pollan. So there are different types of plant-based eating. So, people who generally say they're plant-based it doesn't necessarily mean all plants. So the ones that you might be most familiar with, and sometimes people get confused between plant-based and vegan. So vegan is probably the one you're most familiar with. And that excludes all meat, poultry, fish, seafood, eggs, and dairy. So if it has a face or a mother. And those are really vegans generally become vegan first for animal welfare. So then there are people who are plant-based, and there are people who be whole food plant-based, and we'll talk about what that means in a minute. But people who don't go plant-based for the animals tend to say plant-based. I will say I'm either, depending upon who I'm talking to. Vegan, it often has a lot of baggage with it over time, but I think now it seems to be much more generally accepted. And then there's vegetarian. Oh, actually, it's funny, when I tell people I'm vegan, some of the things you get, you think that people understand what vegan means, but the most common questions I get are, do you eat pasta? And I think that's because people just worry about gluten-free, and they think that eating pasta is a non-healthy way. Obviously, fresh pasta is generally made with eggs, but I think they're just talking about generally pasta. And then people say, well, do you eat fish? Because they don't think of fish as a meat. But any animal flesh, and fish is an animal, is considered meat. It's not just beef. For some reason, people often think of just meat as beef, but meat is chickens, beef, cows, beef and cows, poultry, chicken, pigs, beef, and fish. So vegetarian, also called lacto-ovo, that excludes all animal flesh but includes eggs and dairy. And then there's ovo, which just includes eggs. Pescatarian, which includes fish. And then there's a flexitarian, where people are mostly plant-based, but they may have a little bit of meat every once in a while. So it's really the spectrum. So what is whole food plant-based way of eating? And this is really what I try to endeavor and try to educate people on. So whole food means it's the whole food. So food that comes from plants, right? So plant-based means it's food that comes from plants. So if it grows in the ground, comes from a tree, anything that grows out of the ground is a plant. And then whole foods means that it's natural foods that are not heavily processed. So that's what we're talking about, whole foods. So think about an olive as opposed to olive oil. So the olive oil is processed. Or you think about wheat grains. So you have the wheat germ, but all that is stripped away to make flour. Or oats. So oats, so the the most unprocessed form of oats is the oat grout, which you can eat as a grain like rice. And then there's the steel cut oats, which is the next less processed, and then the old fashioned oats or the rolled oats, and then the instant oats, and then oat flour. So those are kind of the different levels of processing. So it's really thinking about whole foods, so things that are not heavily processed. So it's as close to as the way they're found in nature. And as we say, because it comes from plants, it does not include animals, any animal ingredients, such as milk, fish, meat, and eggs. And it really meets all your nutritional needs. There is a misconception out there that you're going to not have enough protein, or you're not going to have your B12, or you're not going to have calcium. And we'll talk about those a little towards the end. But if you eat a variety of plant-based foods, you will get all your nutritional needs. So what it isn't, so people, you tell people you're vegan, they say, well, how are your salads, right? So it's, while leafy vegetables are an important part of a whole food plant-based diet, they don't contain enough calories to sustain you. So consider that you would need to eat almost 16 pounds of cooked kale. I mean, I love kale. I eat a lot of kale, but you need 16 pounds to get 2,000 calories. So like a pound of spinach is 100 calories, right? So you need 20 pounds of spinach. So, and not eating enough calories leads to decreased energy levels. So it's really important to kind of balance when you're eating this way. So make sure you have things that are going to sustain you, because that is the number one complaint I hear from people. They say, oh, I'm hungry. And I say, you need to eat more because of the calorie density, which we'll talk about a little. So it's not eating enough calories can lead to decreased energy levels, feelings of deprivations, cravings, and even binges. But if you eat enough things to keep you full, that won't happen. And it's not boring. I actually love looking up recipes. It's not the same thing every day. There can be very creative. Actually, a lot of restaurants now are doing a lot of amazing things with plant-based food. So it's actually, you have a lot more things to choose from as opposed to just chicken. There's like 20 different types of beans that you can use to replace that protein on a plant. So you have a lot more creativity that you can do there. And there are so many major benefits to whole food plant-based that eating that are all supported by excellent science. So what are some of the benefits of whole food plant-based? So easy weight management, number one. So most people, they switch to whole food, plant-based, and they drop weight and they're like, I'm eating all the time. So people who eat a plant-based diet tend to be leaner than those who don't. And the diet makes it really easy to lose weight and to keep it off without counting calories. You don't need to count calories. And that has to do with calorie density, which we'll talk about next. Disease prevention. So whole food plant-based eating can prevent, halt, or even reverse chronic diseases, including heart disease and type 2 diabetes. So I like to talk about it. I have this client that, he became my client right out of the ICU. He had just been diagnosed with diabetes after being admitted with a diabetic coma. And his A1C, so the A1C is the measurement of your blood sugar over time, and his A1C was greater than 13. Like, it stops counting. The machine, like, you can't count. So what the goal you want is about 5 to 6. 5 really. And we've been working with him. I've been working with him. He's on a plant-based diet, and the last time I spoke to him, his A1C was 6. And he's been cutting his, he lives in another state, so his medical provider has been cutting down on his insulin, and the goal is to hopefully get him off insulin and get it reversed. And he's very motivated, so it's great. So yeah, it's 6, and it's remarkable. So the lighter environmental footprint, this is a huge one for me too. The science is really, irrefutable on this one. The rate of consumption of resources on our planet is just unsustainable. And you're here, you probably, know all that. But in 2020, so last year, the estimated ability of the earth to sustain life, human life, was about 70 years. So I'm not going to be here in 70 years unless I just live forever because I eat plant-based. But I'd like to leave the planet for my nieces and nephews, who will probably be here. So the production of animal agriculture produces more greenhouse gases than all the forms of transportation combined. So, and that has to do with, because you have to grow the food to feed the cow, and then the cow, the beef, the cow itself, their cow farts, as we like to say. There's a lot of methane in that, and then the processing of the animals. So it's, and then transportation. So really, it's just so much greenhouse gases. So it's good to drive a Prius. It's good to have solar panels. It's good to, try to not use plastic straws. But if you're really serious about environmental footprint, the single best thing that you can do to help heal the earth is to decrease the amount of animal products you consume. It takes 9 calories put into a cow to get 4 calories out. So all that soy, so they're burning down the Amazon to plant soy that they'll truck to feed the cows. Whereas you could just eat the soy. So one, you won't have all the land that the animals are living on. You could grow more plants on that. But it takes 9 calories in to get 4 calories out. And that's without all the other stuff, all the water consumption. It's really, so much of it is really about water. So just eat the soy, take out the middleman, or eat the corn. So it's really about water too. So meat production requires a much higher amount of water than vegetables. So there's generally, to produce 1 kilogram of meat, it requires about 5,000 to 20,000, depending upon where you're growing it, of liters of water. Whereas to produce 1 kilogram of wheat, it requires between 500 and 4,000 liters. So even if it was the highest of the wheat and the lowest of the beef, the wheat still wins out. So in 2,000 gallons, so liter is generally 2 for 1 pound of beef. So kilogram is, the British, Europe, and we're on pounds. So water is also needed for drinking supplies as well as for servicing the cow. So per kilogram of product, animal products really have a larger footprint than any other crop. So bread, for example, like 1 pound per loaf, it's 20 gallons, whereas 1 pound of beef, it's 2,000 gallons. So save the planet, save yourself. Okay, so this has to do with weight management. So I talked about how it's easy weight management, and that's because plants generally have a low calorie density. So this is why you eat more and you weigh less. So there's Dean Ornish's book from years ago. Was called Eat More, Weigh Less. And this is why. So if you look at this, and really studies show that we eat the same amount of weight every day. So we're creatures of habit. So we eat the same amount of weight of food every day. So if you eat things that have fewer calories per pound, but you eat the same number of pounds, so it's usually between like 3 to 5 pounds of food a day. I generally eat more than that, but 3 to 5 pounds of food a day. But if you eat a hamburger, or that's, how much is that? That's ridiculous. Whereas it's not even on here because this is all the bad stuff. So, but if you eat, a pound of spinach, like I said, is 100 calories. So it's real. So this is why people who are plant-based tend to be able to have easy weight management. They lose weight quickly. And then if they kind of stall, you can kind of tweak certain things. But this just gives you an idea of all the processed foods. And so some of these are good, so if you look down at the bottom where it says avoid limits, so nuts, seeds, butters, and tahini, nut butters, are good for you, but you wouldn't want to make sure you eat them in smaller quantities. But this just gives you an idea if you eat 2 pounds of corn, it's only going to be 800 calories. But who eats 2 pounds of corn, right? You'd be full. You'd be so full before you're able to. So this is really one of the reasons why, and it has to do with fiber and water. Plant-based have a lot of fiber and water in it. And then also, even though these are the calories, one of the things is because of the fiber, a lot of those calories don't actually get consumed. They go down into your gut, they feed your healthy gut bacteria, and then they come out as stool. So you may consume the calories, but that fiber, there's a lot of fiber in there that our bodies can't digest. So it doesn't actually even get consumed. So it's not, though 100 calories consumed is 100 calories absorbed. It's more about a 90%. Okay, so here's another quote that I love. So the Ayurvedic proverb. So when diet is wrong, medicine is of no use. But when diet is correct, medicine is of no need. And I think of this for myself. Before I went plant-based, there were several things. So I had eczema, drove me crazy. I had restless leg. I was a horrible sleeper. I was overweight. I had a little bit, I kind of had a little bit of depression that kind of comes and goes. It all went away when I went to plant-based. And it's interesting, particularly about the mood. There's a lot of good data that people, when they switch to plant-based, they're just generally happier. And there's a lot of theories on that you're not getting the hormones from the animals, which is true. That's one of the big risks of eating animal products. But there's a lot. I noticed when I was just like, I'm just happy all the time. I'm much lighter. So physically and emotionally. So there's a lot of good data that switching to plant-based can be an effective way to help anxiety and depression. But so food is medicine is really how we like to think of this. So you take one pill for blood pressure, I hear all the time, another one for cholesterol, and still a different one for diabetes. You've got that cream for eczema, and you still got an allergy pill or something like that. You feel like every time you see your healthcare provider, they want to give you another pill. But what if there's a way to get off of some, if not all, of your medications? And this is really the way. So real food, real food, the way nature intended it to be, what we eat now is food-like substances. I like the stuff in the grocery store. If it comes in a box or a bag, if it doesn't go bad, it's bad for you, is one of the things I like to say. So, so the way nature intended it to be can really be used as medicine. So right now, our healthcare system is not healthcare, it's really sick care. It's really, we're looking for things to treat as opposed to preventing, instead of preventing and promoting health. And that's one of the things that really got me frustrated as a medical provider. When I found this out, I said, we could be making people better as opposed to just managing the symptoms of the illnesses that we've diagnosed. So real food is the way nature intended to be used as medicine. Leafy greens, for example, have been shown to increase nitrous oxide, which is it helps relax your arterial blood vessels, your arteries, and therefore lower your blood pressure. Ginger is well known for its anti-nausea effects. I've actually, even before I went plant-based, I would recommend it a lot to my patients, like ginger chews or making a ginger tea. Broccoli is amazing. So in the soup, there's a nutrient or a compound found in it called in cruciferous vegetables known as sulforaphane. And is really known to protect against cancer. It's a powerful anti-cancer compound. It's highest in broccoli sprouts. So I sprout my own broccoli sprouts. It's super easy. So I try to have a serving of broccoli sprouts every day. Beans and lentils in particular have been shown to even out your blood sugars. So because it has a lower glycemic index, and so it avoids the spikes. Because normally what happens is you eat, you get this glucose, sugar the glucose into your bloodstream, your body pumps out insulin, and then your blood sugar drops. And then you're like, oh, I'm hungry because your blood sugar drops. But if you don't put just sorry, there's my dog. Unprocessed, like flour is just, it's like putting sugar straight into the arteries, whereas beans, it's got those starches that takes a little more time for it to digest. It's slower over time, so you don't get those big spikes that cause the food craving. So genes are not your destiny, I run around saying this all the time. So I really want to relay to you, and I get so frustrated. It just breaks my heart when I hear patients say this. So is that your health is in your hands, and within your power. So your genes are really not your destiny. But people say, how many of us have heard, or spoken the phrases ourselves? Everyone in my family gets heart disease. Everyone in my family has diabetes or cancer. I'm just waiting. It's as though you're waiting until the day your medical provider confirms what you already knew was going to happen. It's like, I know I'm going to get diabetes someday. In actuality, only 3% of all cancers are genetically related. That's amazing, right? And only 20% of chronic diseases. The rest are lifestyle related. It's really, there's one, I think it's Joel Furman, one of the docs, he says, it's the 4 F's. It's feet, fingers, fork. Maybe Jack knows what it is. So feet for exercise, fingers for smoking, fork, and then the F might be family, about relationships. But those are the lifestyle things that really affect our health. I know Jack's gonna go look it up. So you know what you do inherit from your parents, in addition to your genes. You inherit the foods that you eat, the culture of eating, how active you are. These are the things that really contribute more to your health destiny than your genes. So genes are really just a suggestion. And when I say genes, I don't mean blue jeans. I mean your DNA. The environment for these genes needs to be expressed. So that happens when we don't provide our bodies with the nutrients they need to protect it. Our bodies are really amazing, and given the right circumstances, they can heal themselves. I've seen it over and over again. Hippocrates, you probably heard of him. He's considered the father of modern medicine, and he's the one who really said, let food be thy medicine. So it's not what's in your genes, it's what's on your plate. There's a disconnect that, and I hear this too from patients all the time, that people understand that taking a pill has an effect on your body. I'm going to take a blood pressure pill, I might get a little lightheaded. But they don't think the same thing with food. It's the same thing. You're putting a food in, your body's going to digest it, it's going to react to it. So you wouldn't take a pill if it was labeled poison, right? But we do that every day with what we eat, with dairy and everything, and the data is so profound on that. So food is really the original medicine, and everything you put in your body affects the body. So study after study has shown that the healthiest and longest living people in the world eat a primarily plant-based diet. So Dan Buettner, he was a researcher for National Geographic, and he showed, when he did a blue zone study, and these are areas where people in the world where people live the longest and the healthiest. So they don't just live forever, they're also healthy. They're at 98 and they're still out there mowing the lawn. And so areas such as Okinawa, Sardinia, Greece, and even Loma Linda, California, which is a Seventh-day Adventist community, the plant predominant diet was part of the secret. So as I've said, for over 30 years, the research has been there. So T. Colin Campbell in the China study, one of the largest comprehensive nutrition studies ever undertaken, was a collaboration between Oxford University and Cornell University. Amongst other things, it clearly showed that animal protein promotes cancer cell growth. So the studies are, so they've got cancer cells, they give it, 20% animal protein, the cancer cells grow. They cut it down to 3%, the cancer cells slow down. They put it plant-based protein, they stop. It's really amazing. And interestingly, when he was first doing the study, they were actually studying people who had cancer, and the thought was that they were going to need more animal protein because they were thinking malnourishment was the reason why the cancer was growing, but actually they found the opposite, that reducing the animal protein slowed down the cancer. So Dr. Jean Ornish has been doing this forever, way back in 1990, which now seems forever ago, right? That's 30 years, found that you can reverse heart disease the symptom to people who walk around and have chest pain, can reverse those symptoms as little as 7 days by eliminating it. If you go strict plant-based, eliminate animal products and focusing on the whole plant-based, really whole foods, the symptoms go away. Dr. Esselstyn out of Cleveland Clinic, he was actually a general surgeon, but for whatever reason, he got interested in this. He took a cohort of patients that were essentially told they had 6 months to live from debilitating heart disease. And 30 years later, he put them on this regimen of this whole food plant days, a lot of leafy greens because of that nitrous oxide. And 30 years later, some of those patients are still going strong by following his program. And if you ever go to one of his talks, you can see the pictures or you read his books. And when you do a cardiac catheterization, where you look at the blood vessels around the heart, you can see an artery that was blocked, that was closed up. And after a year on a plant-based diet, it's open. And this was on it was on a cardiologist, the patient who had this dramatic. It's really one of the most compelling evidence that I've ever seen for literally the power of this way of eating. Dr. Neil Barnard is one of my personal heroes. He's always suing the FDA and the USDA for their food recommendations. But he has repeatedly shown for his thing that following a low-fat, plant-based diet, you can improve diabetes management and even reverse it. So it's no longer going to be like history of diabetes. Didn't have diabetes a long time ago. His studies even allowed some plant-based meat substitutes and still achieved these results. And then Dr. Michael Greger is famous for, he's written the most thoroughly, researched evidence-based book called How Not to Die, where he discusses the science behind the foods scientifically proven to prevent and reverse 15 different diseases. Diseases of the heart, liver, lung, kidney, brain, cancer such as blood cancer, breast cancer, prostate, and digestive, so colon and stomach cancer. And then even specific diagnoses such as diabetes, high blood pressure, depression. He talks about depression in there, infections and Parkinson's disease. The book looks overwhelming. I remember I actually avoided the book for a while because and I'm a healthcare provider. I was like, oh, it's gonna be super sciencey. He's funny, so it's actually an easy read, and the chapters are kind of spread out. And then what he's come up with is what he called, based on all this research, what he has the Daily Dozen, called the Daily Dozen of the 12 things that he recommends that you consume for health based on the science, based on the evidence. It's all about the evidence for him. Okay, so now we're just going to talk about a few plant-based myths that you hear. So where will you get my protein? You ask, other than the questions I get, do you eat pasta? But where do you get your protein? Any vegan will tell you, this is like the first question you get, I need more protein. So what is protein, right? First of all, and like I say, over the years, the media and advertising, where's the beef, right? So Arby's has done an unbelievably good job on convincing your average consumer that we are in dire need of a large amount of protein and that this should be the focus of every bite. We need more protein, more protein. They also have convinced everyone that the best and only source of protein is animal flesh, that protein equals meat, like that you don't get protein. Have you ever gone to a restaurant, right, and you order a salad and they say, would you like to add protein to that? By this, they mean beef, chicken, shrimp, really, as opposed to beans or tofu. So protein doesn't exist in non-animal foods. Protein, right? It's just, you hear about all the time. So what is protein? So protein is one of 3 macronutrients that everything we eat consists of: protein, carbohydrate, and fat. So everything we eat, that spinach has protein in it. It has carbohydrate and has fat. You wouldn't think a plant has fat in it, right? But it's all three are in everything we eat. Except, well, no, there are carbs in meat too, but there's no fiber in meat. So protein is really just made up of 20 amino acids. So 9 of these are considered essential. And it doesn't mean that the rest are not important. What it means that these 9 can't be manufactured by the human body. Our body can take all the other building blocks and make the other amino acids. But it's they're called essential because it's essential that they be obtained through what we consume, what we eat. So how much do we really need? So ask your average person, and the answer is likely going to be the more the better. You can't have too much protein. But studies have determined what the average minimum amount for humans is, and this is called the estimated average requirement in the United States. This is an average, which means some people need more and some people need less. In the United States, the estimated average requirement is just 4 to 5% of calories from protein. Tiny little bit. So, and they do this by measuring out how much nitrogen, not to get too sciencey, how much nitrogen people excrete. Then you can do that as a percentage. But as a precaution to prevent deficiency, the USDA they doubled it and recommended 8 to 10%. So at this RDA, almost everyone will be getting actually more than they need. So it's very little. It's very little of our calories, right? So the RDA, the recommended daily allowance, is then converted into grams, because that's kind of what we think about per day based on an ideal body weight and the recommended calorie intake. So the RDA is 0.8 grams per kilograms per day, and 1 kilogram is equal to 2.2 pounds. And you can find any sort of you can calculate. You can find the calculators online. So what does this mean in terms of food? So you can think of it in terms of percentage of calories, like protein has 4 calories per gram, or total grams over the course of the day. So you can do it as a percentage of your calories, right? Or just the number of grams. So for a woman whose ideal body weight is 135 pounds, which is 61 kilograms, the RDA would be 49 grams. When converted into calories, that is just 196 calories. So 4 calories per gram protein. So 4 times 49 is 196. So if this is 10% of her calories, that would mean that that woman is taking about 1960 calories. So the average person in the United States that eats similarly, we are not suffering from a protein deficiency. In fact, we are suffering from a protein overload, and too much protein is horribly detrimental to the body. It increases pressure. Our kidneys are the filters. They filter everything out. It really increases pressure on the kidneys and really contributes to kidney disease, amongst other things. People who have more protein have osteoporosis. It affects calcium metabolism, which we'll discuss. But let me just give you a couple examples on, here is that. Okay, this is an example of what I eat in a day. So I often will eat dry oatmeal. You can eat it like cereal, but it gives you an idea of, so whole grains are a great source of protein, right? So 1 cup of dry oatmeal, which would be 2 cups of cooked. So it's actually a lot. I really should have about half a cup of dry to get a cup of cooked, but there's 12 grams of protein in that. Soy milk has 7 grams of protein. Even all the fruit has protein in it. A tablespoon of flaxseed, which is one of Dr. Greger's daily dozen. I get a tablespoon in every day. Nuts and seeds have a decent amount of protein, but they're also high in fat too, so you want to limit them. And then for lunch, sweet potato, spinach, like I said, has protein in it. Black beans, like a half a cup of black beans has 8 grams. Tomatoes, even the things, the watery vegetables, the non-starchy vegetables have plenty of protein in it. And then I always have hummus first, almost every day I have hummus for a snack with some carrots. Look at that, 7 grams of protein, half a cup of hummus. And then dinner, lentils is a great source of protein. Love lentils. What I'm having tonight. I'm having this lentil bolognese for dinner. And then wine. Even wine has protein in it, right? So this collection here, it's 1,600 calories. So, but it's 68 grams of protein, which is too much protein. That's so 17% for protein. So I'll have to figure out how I cut back, maybe on the whole grains. But yeah, so this just shows you, it's not that many calories. A lot of people eat 2,000, but look at all that protein. So it's even that's more protein than I should be consuming. But just to give you an idea of the sources of protein, and it's not just animal products. Okay, so now the other myth people say, well, where do you get your calcium? Calcium is so important. So other than protein, calcium is another question I get. So where does calcium come from? Calcium is actually a mineral that is found in the soil. So it gets absorbed from the soil into the plants. It's not as though it's miraculously found in the milk of cows. It's in the soil. They get the calcium from the plants that they eat. So calcium is important. It's important to strong bones. Our bones have a remarkable ability to maintain the correct level. So when the levels are low, they absorb more from the food that we eat, or they pull it from our bones. So we've always been told, right, that milk does the body good. The milk mustache, media, advertising, it's like ingrained in our brains. But does it really do the body good? So there's a 12-year study of Harvard of 78,000 women who drank milk 3 times a day. They actually broke more bones than women who barely drank milk. And this has to do with a complicated too much protein that makes your blood acidic, because amino acids makes it acidic. And so the body doesn't like acidic blood. So it wants to pull a buffer. And the nearest place for it to pull a buffer is from your bones. And so to make it so it's not acidic. So actually, the rates of osteoporosis in women who drink milk is actually higher. So in the countries that drink more milk, the rates of femoral fractures, of our hip fractures, and osteoporosis are higher than countries that don't. So like Australia has a similar study with the highest dairy consumption had 2 times the risk of hip fractures. And like I said, the theory is that it's the amino acids, so it leaches the calcium to buffer. So yes, dairy does contain calcium, which, like I said, the cows get from eating the grass. But what comes along with that calcium, right? It's not just calcium just sitting there. It's the package. So you always need to think about the package. So you get animal protein, you get saturated fat, you get hormones, because think about it, cow milk comes from a pregnant cow. Hormones, antibiotics that the cows are given to prevent infections, and sugar, the huge amount of sugar in the form of lactose. So how can we actually, what are plant-based sources to keep our calcium levels up and strong? So beans and greens, that is the way we say that. So you get calcium from leafy greens vegetables, so kale. I know I say kale a lot, but all leafy green vegetables, Swiss chard, spinach. Spinach doesn't have, it's not as bioavailable, but and beans, all beans are a great source, and then fortified foods. So a lot of the plant-based milks are fortified, but soy itself is a great source of calcium. Legumes, so 100 milligrams of calcium is in a plate of baked beans. Calcium fortified OJ is 300 milligrams per serving. And soy, like I said, is a great source. And it is important to exercise. Active people tend to keep calcium in their bones. So sedentary people seem to leach out the calcium. And then vitamin D, we need vitamin D for our body to absorb the calcium. So 15 minutes of sun daily, or a supplement. And I personally take a supplement. I get out in the sun, but I take a supplement too for extra. So what next? So you're like, I'm going to eat plant-based because it's going to save the planet, save the animals, and make me healthier. So what do I do next? So what will you eat? Fruits, all fruits, all fruits. You know, you hear diabetics who are told they can't eat fruit, and it just breaks my heart. One of the first things I tell diabetics is eat more fruit. Vegetables, all non-starchy vegetables. So tomatoes, avocados, which is actually a fruit, but peppers, cucumbers, butternut squash, everything like that. Tubers, so anything that grows underground. So potatoes, sweet potatoes, any root vegetables. Whole grains, as I mentioned, whole grains are a great source of protein. So whole grains, so meaning not processed, so brown rice instead of white rice, right? Quinoa is actually a complete protein, has all those 9 essential amino acids. So all the whole grains, there's sorghum, there's oats, rolled oats, old-fashioned oats is a whole grain. Legumes, so all legumes, black beans, chickpeas, lentils, cannellini beans, avocados, nuts, and seeds. Those are higher in fat, so you'd want to limit them, but they're important. They're important fats. And then some minimally processed foods such as tofu, tempeh, which is actually a whole food, which is a type of it's fermented soy. Some whole grain flour, so maybe some whole grain bread, and plant-based milks. So mostly completely whole food, but some minimally processed foods. So what are the keys to success? So this is the problem. So a lot of people say, oh, I'm hungry. So you really want to enjoy non-starchy and leafy vegetables in generous amounts. So green light, eat as much as you want. But you want to look to carbohydrate-rich whole grains, beans, fruits, and starchy vegetables provide enough calories to power you through the day so that you're not feeling hungry. So whole or minimally processed foods are dense in nutrients, not calories. So as you adjust to this way of eating, like I said, you may find that you're a little hungry shortly after a meal, but over time you get, and that's like one of the number one things, and that happened to me. I'm like, I'm tired. And you have to eat more. You get a sense of how much you need to eat. So I started eating like half a baked potato with my lunch to really give me some starch to power me through. You'll start to figure out how much you need to eat to stay satisfied. The best whole food plant are the ones you enjoy. So focus on pleasure to stay on a healthy path. Like, don't torture yourself. So if you like chili, have a veggie chili, have whole grain pasta, have mashed potatoes. Just don't put the milk. You can put plant-based milk in it, or whatever else. You know, there's plenty of plant-based mac and cheese recipes out there, or cheese sauces. So really a healthy pattern of plant-based eating leads to good health and a healthy weight without counting calories. Or you don't need to focus on individual nutrients. If you eat a variety, you're going to get what you need. So no food bath required. And don't let the best get in the way of the good is one of my very common sayings. So if you think I need to be perfect, you're going to fail, you're going to stumble. So if it means you can just do 2 meals a day plant-based, that's better than 3 meals a day with meat in it. So small steps will improve. Okay, so how to get started. So really, like I said, really keep it simple. People are most successful when they start out, like, don't try to do all these fancy recipes. Really try to keep it simple. You know, start with breakfast. So breakfast, and really all the data really shows that we are creatures of habit. We tend to eat the same like 3 meals for breakfast over and over and over, or the same 5 to 7 meals for dinner. Dinner is really the one where people have the more variety, but breakfast and lunch tend to be the same. So start with breakfast. So oatmeal, avocado toast is a great one. A sweet potato hash, yum, yum. I love a scrambled tofu with a lot of vegetables for breakfast. Try substituting plant-based milk for regular milk. Lunches can be an avocado and tomato sandwich, or maybe hummus and veggies sandwich for lunch, or a big salad. if you have a big salad though, make sure you've got beans and something and some other starch in there to keep you full. So for dinner, you can try having a bean burger instead of a piece of meat with your grain. So people are used to having what they consider a protein, a meat, and then a starch, and then a veggie, right? That's not how we're meant to break things up. But if you need to have that kind of look on your plate, just have a bean burger instead of the meat with your grain and veggies at dinner. And uh, Michael Pollan actually did vegan before 6. So he would do vegan, completely vegan till dinner, and then he ate whatever he wanted for dinner, and he lost like a bunch of weight, and he felt great. He came off his blood pressure medicine. I would recommend doing completely, but that is just something to get started. And then usually, and for me, it's so interesting. People will say to me, "Well, will you ever go back to the other way of eating?" And I say, "Why? I feel so good. Why would I do that?" It's like, I feel so good. I have so much energy. I'm just happier. And so why would I want to go back to that way of eating? So these are some of the books that I've talked about. The China Study was the protein in cancer. Dean Ornish, he's got a whole bunch of books, and he's the one who showed you can stop the symptoms of people who have chest pain in 7 days. Dr. Esselstyn is the one who had the radiographic change. How Not to Die is really, it's next to me. It's like my Bible. Dr. Barnard, the Reversing Diabetes, and then Dan Buettner has the Blue Zones, and there's a bunch of great recipes in there as well. So just some of the books, and just so that's it for today. I'll take some questions, but so the other event I have coming up this month is managing diabetes with plant-based nutrition. So really going into the science on what causes diabetes, which is really insulin resistance, and how to manage that and potentially reverse with a plant-based diet. And you can register for that on my webpage. But that's on May 20th from 5 to 7, and that's also online. Okay, so does anyone have, thank you for, I know it's almost 7 o'clock, sorry. So anyone have any questions? Anything I can help you with? No? Okay. Okay, so that's it.